Behind the net, centers, flat, finds to Clarke, shot, oh, rebound, scores! Clarke scores the game winner at 12 minutes and 1 second of Sunday.
Hey everybody, it's Isaiah, and I'm here with Chef B, who's going to tell us about one of our sponsors here. Chef?
Yeah, O&B Puckcast is now brought to you by Summit Public Adjusters. The winter months can be especially hard on our homes, from roof damage and peeling siding to frozen pipes and toilet overflows. Call Summit Public Adjusters before you call your insurance company. Dealing with your insurance company can be stressful and confusing. Let Summit Public Adjusters take the stress out of the claim process by having our guys work for you. Get the most for your money and your repairs. The next time the big snow or the rain leaves you with some home damage, contact us for a free consultation. Summit Public Adjusters are licensed in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Learn more at summitpublicadjusters.com or call 215-752-0560. Just tell them that the chef sent you.
Yeah, what was that number again, Chef?
215-752-0560.
That's terrific. All right, we're going to carry on with the rest of our show. And it is Isaiah, and we are back. The O&B Puckcast. This is episode 143. And we're also brought to you by FlyersNittyGritty.com. And, of course, Jim South Street, 40 years of the best cheesesteaks, hoagies, fries you ever want in the Grand Philadelphia tradition. Jim South Street. 400 South Street in Philadelphia, PA. They use DoorDash, so if you live down there and you can't make it over, by all means, no excuse, just call DoorDash, work it out, and again, get Jim's delicious food. Jim's South Street, 400 South Street in Philadelphia. And yes, just a reminder, everybody, the O&B Puckcast can be found at O&B Puck, at O&B Puck on Twitter. We have a Facebook page. Just plug in O&B Puckcast on YouTube. Get to our YouTube channel, all of our episodes. You can make comments there. And, of course, if you could rate and subscribe on Apple, SoundCloud, Spotify, Stitcher, you name it, iHeart. Yeah, you got it. So if you could give us a rating and subscribe, we'd really appreciate it. Of course, there's never any charge. We'll read the next rating we get on Apple Podcasts. And with that, everybody, we're going to have a full crew tonight. So we got a lot to talk about. We're going to call this the Flyers Fan Survival Guide episode. We're going to try and give you the perspective of fans that have followed this team from 30 to 50 years, how to get through this, how to enjoy the games, what to look for, and what to expect from management. Because after all, the Flyers have lost 11 in a row as we record. And this is a game night. This is something we normally don't do. But we have to look at the big picture now. We can't get caught up in the minutia of the calendar. They have no wins in 2022. The last victory came on December 29th at Seattle. They're 16 points out of a playoff spot at the halfway point of the season after what appears to be a third disastrous season in the making out of the last four. Chuck Fletcher will have a state of the team presser on Wednesday. In short, this is a cluster F of a season that screams massive overhaul. I think the idea that you can kind of retool this thing, and they've had retools. We've been actually retooling, and when I say we, the Flyers, have been retooling more or less since 2012, and or at least 2014 when Hassel took over. So this constant refrain about how fragile they are is really just a recurring theme over 3/4 of the era since then. We'll get into that and some other stuff. But before we get rolling, let's go with our panel. Jeff, how are you? How are you doing, man?
Good. Looking forward to trying to find a light at the end of the tunnel here. It's going to be hard.
Yeah, definitely. And, of course, we have with us the great Dan Silver.
What's going on, guys?
Not much. It's a tough era. And, Dan, I did a lot of discussion there about, the state of where they're at right now. We talked on our last show. We called it the Flyers State of the Franchise. And I think we laid it out pretty well. And since then, the Flyers have lost 6 in a row. I just want to get overall thoughts about taking this in, following this team for 30 plus years.
I mean, it's, we talked about this our last show, Isaiah. I mean, it's, you said it was the lowest point in your, 50 plus years or how many years it was in following the team. And this is certainly, look, things always feel kind of more powerful or emotional in the moment, right? It always kind of feels like that. Like, I'm sure there have been times where we've said over the past, like, man, this is a terrible time. And, but it really does right now. It feels like arguably the lowest point since I've been following the team. And some of it has to do with things out of the control, meaning, back when the Flyers were so bad and they got, they were the worst team in the league and they ended up with the number 2 overall pick. They got JVR. In that scenario back then, there wasn't a salary cap like this. It's sort of the salary cap being the way that it is, I think really kind of plays into the hopelessness that I feel because you look at the position that the Flyers are in, and if they'd been in a position like that in years past, many, decades ago, you'd say, oh, they can figure out a way to get out of this, right? They can just spend money and sign guys, but you can't do it this day and age. So it's a lot harder to rebuild and get rid of bad contracts these days than it used to be, which I think leads to, this isn't the worst Flyers team since we've been following them, but the situation to me feels the most hopeless because of the makeup of the team and the cap situation.
Mm-hmm. Well, we were checking before the show in 06-07. Shep was pointing out they were minus 89 goal differential. They had 6 points. You really kind of came in and you saw a general manager who just wasn't really into the job anymore in Bob Clarke, and he handed everything over to Holmgren. They made promises about what they were going to do, and they kept them. And what they gave us is some breadcrumbs of hope. And you already had Carter and Richards in place. So there were some seeds there, and you had a commitment from an organization with an owner who had the passion to really change this thing around. And Chef, it's a lot different this time. Even though the Flyers are a more talented squad, they're kind of in that mushy middle of lousy.
Yeah, this is like a conundrum, man. I on paper, if you see this full team, when everybody's healthy, you feel like, okay, it has some potential. It can't be close to that 06-07 team, but everybody, a lot of the players are hurt. A lot of the players are playing, it seems like gun shy. They're afraid to mix it up against the boards. It's disheartening to me. And we last show we talked about what players we would try to rebuild around, and we came up with less than a handful, and that's not good. That doesn't spell good for the future of this team. And Dan has pointed out on numerous occasions, you have Claude Giroux getting ready to probably depart this team. If he wants to, he can go basically almost anywhere he wants. And they have no heir apparent. There's nothing to get excited about in the minors. And looking at their picks for the next couple of years, there's not much to look forward to there either. So they got some moves and some tough decisions have to be made. They're going to have to amass a couple of first rounders within the next 2 years and a couple early second rounders to actually turn this thing around if they can.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, if Carter Richards, what's the closest thing the Flyers have? If we're clearing everything out, what, Hart and Farabee, maybe? Dan,
we talked about this. I mean, Chef said it less than, a handful of players, and it's almost less than that. I mean, Hart, Farabee, who's injured now, Cam York has shown that he can be an exciting player, but none of these guys are elite franchise players. I mean, when Ron Hextall was building up this team, the way I saw it happening was that I knew that it looked like we weren't going to have elite generational forward, but we were going to build through the goalie and the defenseman. And, you're thinking about Shane Gostisbehere and Phil Myers and Travis Sanheim and Ivan Provorov. Well, Shane Gostisbehere is gone. Phil Myers is gone. Ivan Provorov has not lived up to expectations, and Sanheim is just kind of So you can't build like that, which was kind of how I envisioned this team eventually competing for a cup. And so, yeah, there's just not that many building blocks, not that many guys who can go out there and create offense on their own. We've got a lot of guys that are complementary pieces, Our best young players are complementary pieces. And as Chef said, we need to start accumulating some draft picks. But part of the problem is, this year we've traded our second round pick, which is going to be a high pick. It's going to be in probably the mid 30s. We traded that away, I believe, to the Coyotes to take Shane Gostisbehere's contract. And then, we traded away our second round pick next year in 2023, which is supposed to be a great draft in the Ristolainen trade. So, we've got our first round picks, but those second round picks are gone. Teams are not going to be trading away 2023 picks that easily because it's supposed to be such a good draft. I see everyone on Twitter is like, oh, we should have stockpiled picks in 2023. Well, that's what everyone's saying. So they're not going to be as likely to give away those picks. So, and you can't really build through free agency these days because the only guys that really hit free agency are unrestricted free agents, and the best guys get tied up before they hit it. So it's a bad landscape in general to try and do a rebuild, and it's worse when you look at the assets that this team has, which are not a lot of draft capital moving forward.
No, it's hard to argue with that, but my belief is that someone out there, with Chuck Fletcher at somebody else, can do this job. It can be done. There are players that teams want, and they might be willing to overpay. But and just a little aside, listening to Elliot Friedman today, he talked about Claude Giroux and that decision, and he kept saying it screams Colorado, but what kind of salary concessions will the Flyers make, and who Colorado, the Avalanche, be willing to give up that would help the Flyers and entice them? Obviously, I think they were after. There was a rumor. I don't know. Other pundits have said that things weren't far along in terms of the Flyers asking about Newhook. Maybe that was in a different deal. He's contributing to their lineup right now. But Chef, that takes me to, and Dan, you'll get a chance on this one too. To me, the hard matter for the Flyers is their center ice play is not very dynamic, and they're locked into two plotting, not super creative offensive players. They're nice players. Couturier obviously is an elite defensive player when he's healthy. We're worried about his age, how well the contract will age, the no move clause that kicks in. Then we have Hayes coming off 3 different procedures having to do with his core. Will he ever be the same? The Flyers have to, if they're ever going to get out of this, find a way to get a couple of young centers, at least of top 6, second line ability, who bring offensive flair. And that, to me, that has to be job one. I know they keep the puck out of the net, and a lot of general managers and management types think that is the backbone of every organization that wins, keeping the puck out of your net. But we've seen this year the fact that their power play is so awful, no margin for error whatsoever. And if you have a good goalie and you have a defense that at least can make good decisions, if not be super creative, Cale Makar types, I think that center position is something they really need to concentrate on.
I was always hoping that Dan was going to be right about Morgan Frost, and I just haven't seen the evolution of him. I thought he could possibly be that third line, possibly second line center. I mean, we were all hoping for it. I mean, everybody was rooting for the kid. He just hasn't done anything, and he is getting top line minutes now. Unfortunately, the top lines are not what they're supposed to be. So we have people falling down everywhere, getting on the injured left and right. So it's a big decision. I think I don't know if I trade away Carter Hart quite yet. We finally got a goalie. And, I'm thinking maybe you could send Martin Jones somewhere as a steady backup in the season by the trade deadline and maybe get a 4th round or 5th round, maybe, something back for him. I don't know. But looking at the roster and trying to make those moves, it's going to be very difficult. You're going to eat some salary here and there. And, this is going to be a difficult task. And I don't envy Chuck Fletcher. I know a lot of people are calling for his resignation or get him to get fired. But, Dan, I think, Dan, you tweeted it out. The Flyers are essentially fielding an AHL lineup, aren't they? It's 11 players from the minors at one point. So, how do you fire a guy that hasn't even fielded the team that he wanted to on the ice?
Well, I think the problem is other teams have had a lot of issues with the virus and players out of the lineup, and at least they were competitive. They had a strong work ethic and character and identity that they were going to grind through, get through like a 500 period, and then wait for people to come back. The Flyers are constantly talking about how fragile they are. If they don't get the first goal, then they lose, what are they, like 1-18-4 or something like that if they don't get the first goal. But if they get first goal, I'm not any more confident that they'll do that much better. See, that's all falling apart. In the beginning of the year, they would come out in the first period, and then the second period, there was a problem. But it's not even about that anymore, So, Dan, getting back to the center idea, what do you agree with that, or do you think I'm putting too much emphasis on that? What do you say?
They're just so bereft of any talent down the middle. I guess obviously Sean Couturier is going to be here for the foreseeable future unless they find a way to move him. And we're paying Kevin Hayes so much money for the next, 4 seasons. It's like, man, we've got $15 million committed to Couturier and Hayes. So that's 2 of our top 3 center spots. Presuming those guys are on the team, you're not going to be paying them to, play on the 4th line. So we need to, we need to set, it would be really good to have better centers, but so there's probably only room for one though, unless we're going to move Hayes or Couturier to the wing or get rid of one of them.
They have to move Couturier. To me, that is something they have to do. They have to, or else they are just stuck with a contract with a guy who's slowing down, getting more injured, and he has 2, maybe 3 good years, but he's no offensive dynamo. And then you have Hayes.
Get someone to take that contract.
He's a Selke Trophy winner. If you get a team that just can't keep the puck out of their net, and they think the problem is down the middle, he could be a valuable piece. It's more about clearing the contract for me than anything, because I think you guys tear this thing down to the studs, because for the reasons that you're talking about. Because if you're going to settle having Hayes and Couturier, you're never going to win a cup. And to me, this brings me back to the very beginning. The idea that this franchise has morphed into one that always had an eye towards at least a window of a cup contention. In other words, if they weren't going to go into the season as a contender, you could see it in the offing, right? Now they are the kind of team, and look, this has been discussed before. There's somebody in the organization said this to Ann Sanfilippo. But what are we now? Are we the kind of franchise that talks like it's just okay to make the playoffs and that's a big deal? Now, if that's who the Flyers have become, count me out. The Flyers have to return to becoming the kind of team who has expectations of championship contention. And that means they're going to have to move a lot of salary, make drastic decisions that may seem unrealistic now, but it's just getting worse and worse and worse. And we were complaining about mediocrity. Now they're headed toward the bottom of the league. They're in the bottom 5.
Yeah, I hope, that they could do something like move Couturier and burn everything down to the base and build it back up. I just think it's going to be so difficult to do something like that. I don't envy Chuck Fletcher if he's around trying to do this and deal with Comcast at the same time. I'm probably going to be giving up my Flyer season tickets. How many season ticket holders are going to be, giving up their tickets and there's going to be some pressure on the team to at least be somewhat competitive. I mean, it's a there's just so many hurdles to a rebuild the way that you want to do it. And I agree, it's what they should try and do. I mean, I'm concerned.
Who's in the seats now? Who's in? You know what I'm saying? It's not like they want to get butts in seats, and they did the renovations in the balcony, and that's all good. But the mission is lost. They have a problem, a PR problem as an organization for a lot of the reasons that we talked about with the alumni and Ed Snyder, and some of that stuff was overblown. I would agree, but the season ticket holder meetings, they have a lot of problems.
I've worked for hockey teams. I know what it's like sitting in those meetings with executives when you're talking about ticket sales, and it's, being in those meetings and selling to these executives that you're going to do a 3-year rebuild and there's probably going to be empty seats for the next 3 years is not it's not something these executives want to hear in these meetings. It's not easy. So I know that we're going to, we're going to get to Claude Giroux here at some point. I have some concerns about whether this guy's even going to waive his no movement clause.
Well, I was going to bring that up.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to bring that up. So if he goes anywhere, like I said, it's pretty much his choice whether he wants to. Saying he does, what do you think his destinations will be? And then also, if he doesn't, is he doing it as a kind of like FU to the organization that didn't do anything for him? And he's in this past couple of years to try to build a contending team around him.
Strike me as that kind of guy, though. I mean,
I know, but if he does nothing, they don't get anything for him.
My thought process on this is that I've heard that he really likes Philadelphia in terms of having his family here, and I think does he have 2 kids now?
Yeah.
I don't know if I think it's 2 kids now. And listen, I mean, these guys' personal lives, as guys get older, their personal lives kind of sometimes take precedence, right? Like if he really likes it here and he doesn't want to be away from his wife and 2 young children for a prolonged period of time, maybe he decides that he doesn't want to waive his no movement clause. I think it's likely that he does, but I'm just saying that there is some chance that he doesn't waive it because he doesn't want to leave his family. And to me, if that happens, again, I don't think it's going to happen, but if it happens, it will make me question, where's this guy's competitive drive at this point, right? Like if he's not open to leaving town for 2 to 3 months because he doesn't want to leave his family. But so, the things Pierre LeBrun was reporting a couple of days ago that they haven't even talked about it with him waiving his no movement clause. I find that hard to believe, but, I'm guessing that if he waives it, he's going to want to go somewhere somewhat close, like New York or Boston or, I don't know, Carolina or Washington or something like that. I don't know. Who knows?
I think you guys might be missing out on something. He's an uber competitive guy, and he might be looking at this thing as in terms of legacy. What's my career going to be? How am I going to make it to the Hall of Fame? He might be in that mode right now, and he's got to be tired of losing. He's got to know that things aren't going to work out. And if he could get an express pass when a team is on a hot streak going into the playoffs, as opposed to signing with somebody else, being on the open market and not knowing and seeing all the pitfalls. I mean, he saw what happened last year, and this year we had such hope, and then 20 that had hope, and then we had the pandemic, and the whole team kind of just in the bubble. They didn't play very well, and that kind of continued into the miniature season that followed. And certainly this year with all the moves, he had to feel like, wow, they're going good. I don't see him as passing up an opportunity to go to a team that has everything all set but him. And I think it could enhance his legacy and his chances of getting into the Hall of Fame. Chef, what do you think?
I would love, and don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to be negative about it. I would love to see him go out somewhere and get a cup and maybe finish his career as a winner. I can also see him, like Dan said, there's a lot of talk about him really liking it here. What if he signs a 3-year homer deal, an extension right before the trade deadline? What do we do then? I mean, do we go, oh, okay, we got Claude? I'm not going to begrudge him either way. I think he's a great player. I think it could be in his own best interest for him to go to a winner and try to chase that ring and a cup. But I at this point, of all the people that I think could use him, there's a lot of them that are don't have a lot of room for him. I mean, I can't. You had mentioned Colorado. That would take a little bit of moving of money back and forth from both people, from both teams. So, I mean, you could see him possibly going somewhere, like you said, and like Dan said, in the immediate area. But could he go to Florida? Could Tampa Bay or Florida be a destination for him? I think Florida could be. I think that's a good chance. But
every player, every team could probably use him. Don't get me wrong. But I'm just saying it's there's like it seems to be a real good fit. Like Elliot Freeman was saying in Colorado, and I'm just dialing them up right now. But if he signs a deal with them this year and he doesn't go anywhere, we have to have a new show and call it the Flyers fan Harakiri guide, because they really got to strike big on this one, or they're in trouble. Because essentially, if he doesn't go, they're going to have to trade another prime piece, Provorov. They need to get a center in here, or they are effed. That's the way I look at it.
One quick thing, and I'll let Dan take over. Yeah. It's if Giroux's our only hope of getting a first rounder or a second rounder, correct? Trading.
Does
Provorov?
Ristolainen could. Ristolainen has value. It depends. You get a team that's more of a finesse team on defense. They might want a guy like a Ristolainen, right-handed guy.
Obviously, Chef, I heard you mention Provorov. I mean, if they decide they're going to trade Ivan Provorov, they should be getting a whole lot more than they would get for Giroux or Ristolainen. But that's
looking for a Byfield or who's the guy?
Yeah, trading an Ivan Provorov would be a huge decision. I mean, he still is the linchpin of this team's defense. I mean, if you think this team is bad now, take that guy out of the lineup. So, that's going to be a big decision. But just in terms of the expiring unrestricted free agents, Giroux's supposed to get you a first round pick and a prospect, and Ristolainen potentially could get you a similar type of return, right? But there's still 2 months until the trade deadline. So,
and that's the thing. Let's not make a big deal out of the fact that they haven't broached the subject yet, because the trade deadline is it's in March. So, that's the thing where I really wonder what Chuck Fletcher is going to talk about. He can't talk about the playoffs. I mean, it'd be a Jim Mora moment, the playoffs. I mean, it's just a way, because they're 16 points behind out of a playoff spot now, and they'd have to play like 750 hockey. It's not happening. I mean, even if everybody came back next day, they're out of it. So, I'm sorry, Dan, I interrupted, but you're going through the players that are on the free agent deals that you would expect that they're going to move on from. Braun, but he's not going to get a first round pick.
Who?
Justin Braun.
Oh, Braun. Yeah, I mean, if they trade Braun away, I'd expect to get maybe a third or fourth round pick. Yandle's worthless. Ristolainen, maybe a first round pick. Giroux, again, if he goes to Colorado, I know a lot of fans want Newhook. I mean, I would be shocked if the Colorado Avalanche trade away a really good young player like Alex Newhook, who's got many years left of team control, in a deal for an expiring free agent. Like, I would be very surprised if they would do Newhook straight up, much less draft picks. But if you're going to try and get a guy like a Newhook or a Byram, that's probably going to be the trade straight up. I doubt they would do it. I think it's more of a lesser tier prospect and maybe a first round pick. And I think you'd be trying to get first round picks in 2023 is my guess. But who knows? They need to restock a little bit. James Van Riem's like, this isn't his last year. He's got 1 year left next year. They're going to be trying to trade him. And I guess he'd be a guy that next year could be a rental. But as you mentioned, teams can only retain up to 50% of a guy's salary. And the closer you get to the trade deadline, the more cap space that a team has banked up to be able to use. So like you look at a team like I'm going to take a look at Colorado right now. And right now, Colorado only has $73,000 worth of cap space. So, they're going to have to, if they take Giroux, they're going to have to take $4 million of his salary at least. So you're going to have to get something back to eat salary. I don't know what it would be, but there's clearly some. They couldn't just do that trade right now. They'd have to trade some salary back. And most teams that are going for the cup are in the same position where they don't have much cap space. Like if you look at cap friendly right now, there's only the only teams with enough space to take on half of Giroux's salary are the Sharks, Kraken, Coyotes, Devils. The Rangers do, which is an interesting one, right? The Rangers could take on half of his salary right now. The rest are the Ducks, the Predators, the Wings, the Senators, the Blue Jackets, and the Sabres. I mean, the only team in there that you'd think could be a logical spot for Giroux to go would be the Rangers with the cap space. So
they've been mentioned, definitely. The Flyers definitely have to get creative, and then if you're talking about possibly a third team involved, then it really gets convoluted. You don't know how creative the Chuck Fletcher could get. We've seen some deals where things were worked out. I don't know if Chuck's got his abacus out to make that work. But this is, as a fan, call this show the fan survival guide. What we're looking for, if I'm a fan and having gone through the 2007 season, having gone through the early 90s before, when the 80s teams kind of flamed out and we had 90 and 91 before Lindros got here. We looked at what's the philosophy. Were they going to come up with a statement? We want to be X kind of team, and we're going to take our time to do it right. Are they going to do the letter like the Rangers? Are they going to announce like the San Jose Sharks did like about 7 years ago? We want to be a north-south team, a big, heavy north-south team that plays with a lot of speed, whatever. Give us some red meat that we can chew on here, Chef, because that's the problem with the Flyers right now. It's like, in addition to everything else, part of them being so, quote, fragile, they don't have an identity. They haven't established that they have a lot of character. And that's as much of a reason to really turn this thing over as anything else.
Yeah. You know what? I can take, like, when a team is in the process of rebuilding and you're working the tools and the players are not good enough yet, you can see some problems. They're making mistakes and all that. But this really pisses me off, this part of it, that, and I've said it over the years, you can't underestimate how important the rah-rah guys are in the locker room. Unfortunately, I'm going to blame the leadership of this team. How can you go out there every night like this and think that this is acceptable? Not even to the fans. The hell with the fans. I don't even think like that. To myself, for my self-respect of letting something like this happen. Have you? And here's the worst part. I haven't heard any leaked locker room stuff about how Claude Giroux or Cam Atkinson or Kevin Hayes have lost their collective bleep over the way they played and started chewing out other players on the team. Damn well in the past that has happened on teams where guys have gone out there and like chewed out their entire team in a locker room to make a difference. Like, we got to be better than this. I haven't heard anything like this. So that's the most angering part of this, that I look at this up and down the roster. I know we talked about saving 3 or 4 people on this roster, but we saw a little competitiveness from Cam York when he stopped that empty net goal at the end of the game. We saw a little bit of competitiveness from Farabee by finishing his checks and forechecking. He doesn't give up. Cam Atkinson's like the freaking Energizer Bunny. But other than that, I don't see anybody. I can look up and down this roster. I don't see anybody that's telling me like, hey, yeah, we're better than this, and then we can play better. It's disheartening. It's bothering me. I know. I mean, I was never a great player in any respect at any sport except for maybe baseball. But I left everything out there. And as Philadelphia fans, I think we appreciate players that have done that over the years, and they kind of get like enshrined in our hearts forever. There's nobody. I don't see anybody on the team that does this, and that's saying a lot.
It is. I mean, since Chris Pronger got hurt, they really haven't had a true leader on the team. That's just a reality. They never replaced that. Richards was a little callow when they named him captain, and Pronger really helped him in that regard. That was the last time they had somebody in there that would kick ass and take names in the locker room and hold, and be the leader for holding them accountable. That's part of the problem. That's what happens when you fall apart. Don't believe in themselves, and you have that here we go again mentality. So listen, I think the Flyers need to make an organizational statement. This is what I expect from management. It probably won't come this Wednesday from Fletcher, okay, but it should come at some point. Now maybe it'll be somebody besides Fletcher. I don't know. We've speculated on that maybe somebody like Dean Lombardi would actually take over. And he's been laying in the weeds. He's actually done a rebuild. He's built a team from scratch. I'm not saying I'm the biggest fan of what he did in L.A., but the bottom line is they got across the finish line twice. And they built a really good program over there. And maybe he's ready to at least take an interim role. I mean, do we trust Chuck Fletcher to kind of shepherd this rebuild or whatever it's going to be?
We talked about this a lot. I mean, I'm not as negative about Fletcher as a lot of people are. I think that he's sort of done what he's supposed to have done at this point with the ads that he made the first off season and then the ads that he made this past off season. I think a lot of the injuries clearly are not his fault. I think he's a smart guy. I think that if it was me, I'd probably, if you're going to do a full rebuild, I'd be okay like giving him a chance to say, hey, what do you think? What can we do here? As opposed to a lot of people are talking about Danny Briere. Like, here's my thing about Danny Briere. Like, he's never been a GM anywhere. It seems like a lot to put on someone. Clearly, they think very highly of him. It was rumored he might be going to Montreal as a new GM. But it sounds like the Flyers were very concerned about wanting to make sure that Briere stayed in the organization. So as I understand it, he'll be getting some kind of promotion soon. Not going to be to GM, but, I wouldn't want a first-time GM trying to lead a rebuild like that. Chuck Fletcher has got, he's got the ability to go into a board meeting with Flyers executives from Comcast who don't know much about hockey, and they'll, listen to him and his thoughts. It's going to be younger for a tougher guy like Briere to go into those kinds of meetings, and at least as far as I would believe, and kind of stand against some of these folks if they have differing opinions. So I'd be okay with letting Fletcher try this unless someone has a better idea of someone who can lead through the rebuild that's proven.
Yeah, the only idea I have is somebody like Lombardi takes a job and they groom somebody like Briere and make him assistant. And Lombardi's kind of like, he's only going to be here for a couple years. And when they feel that Briere's ready to go, I'm just like, this is not something I want per se, just laying out some kind of alternative scenario because we don't really have anything else. So I guess it comes down to a question we talked about last time is like, who are the foundational players? We talked about and maybe Farabee, and beyond that, I'm really not sure. Again, I have to reiterate, and Chef, I'll go to you. They have to have a unified, cogent statement about what their plans are, A, B, C, and E. Tell the fans where we're going from here. The idea that we're just going to add a little here and there has completely failed. This has just been happening time and time and time again since 2012. It has failed. And it just can't come back with a lot of the same guys. It's not going to work because they don't have any spine. So there's something fundamentally broken here. That's really the heart of it for me.
Yeah, I think when he delivers his speech or whatever he's going to do on Wednesday, it needs to have, and it really does, it needs to have doesn't have to be detailed. You don't have to tell us who you're going after or what you're doing. They have to sit there and own it and say, look, we tried. We tried by signing all these players. It blew up in our face. Injuries happen. We accept that. We accept the whole part of this process. We, as when I say we, as the Flyers organization looks at everything, we understand this is unacceptable to the fans. And boom, we're going to promise to make moves going forward to rebuild this franchise to its greater glory. I don't want to hear anything other than that. Like I said, you don't want to play your card and say, hey, we're going after this player in this organization and we're going to try that. That's just silly. I don't care. I don't want to know what they're trying to do. I just want to know that they're doing their damnedest to try. That's all I want. I want somebody to know. I want somebody to tell me and make me feel comfortable and make me believe the fact that you're going to do something to improve the product that you're putting on the ice. Because as of right now, as a fan, as a podcaster, as a whatever we are, it doesn't matter. It's unacceptable.
It's horrendous. And you know who else thinks it's horrendous, Dan? Bob Clarke. We didn't get a chance to talk too much. I don't want to dwell on it because a lot of people have weighed in. Just wanted to get your impressions because I'd just like you to give your impressions of what went down there and on Cam Jansen and Andy Strickland podcast. Yeah,
a couple weeks ago, Bob Clarke went on the podcast with Andy Strickland and with Cam Jansen. And by the way, I used to be a hockey play-by-play announcer, and Andy and he used to come on at intermission sometimes, and this was before he was as big as he is now. And he's a really nice guy. Anyway, he had Bob Clarke on, and Bob Clarke, really, they were talking about golfing and the Broad Street Bullies, and it wasn't until about 45 minutes in that they even started talking about Hextall, and Clarke talked about how much they loved Hextall as a player. He was so passionate and loved the Flyers organization, and they were so excited when he came back as the GM. And then, as we've heard, I mean, he ostracized and shut out the alumni and other staff members to the point where it was basically like, the visual of Hextall going into a room, closing the door and being like, I'm making the decisions, right? And obviously the big part of the interview was when Hextall said that, all the scouts wanted Cale Makar, and, Hextall
Clarke
overruled them. What's that?
You mean Clarke said that Hextall did?
Yeah, Clarke said that Hextall, that all the scouts wanted Cale Makar and Hextall overruled them. Not true from what I understand. Most of the scouts wanted Miro Heiskanen, but It is true that Hextall, it sounds like, overruled the scouts. Bob Clarke is good friends with Chuck Fletcher's dad, who was a pretty famous GM, and
Cliff,
Cliff Fletcher, and I think that he's good. He's good friends with Chuck Fletcher, and I think so. Part of it probably was wanting to defend Chuck a little bit, and saying, "Look, this is the hand he was dealt." Ron Hextall screwed up a lot, and Bob Clarke's always been someone who, when you will speak his mind, right? Like, what does he care? Like, he's basically like a board member with the Flyers. I mean, he's got a job, but like, he doesn't really do a whole lot, and he gets paid a decent amount of money. They're never going to fire the guy. He can really say whatever he wants. But even during the interview, he's like, I probably said too much. He starts talking about how Hextall traded Braden Shen and no one even knew about it at the draft, and that they could have had Ryan O'Reilly. And then he said, I'm probably talking too much. Yeah, probably. But, that's Bob Clarke for you. I think there will be a lot of people going to bat for them to keep Chuck Fletcher. The interesting thing is, it was reported earlier this year that when Alain Vigneault was fired, it was after a really embarrassing loss. And the reports were that Chuck Fletcher wasn't prepared to get rid of Vigneault at that moment. And Dave Scott was so upset by the loss the night before, he basically told him he had to fire Vigneault, right? So there clearly is a line where Dave Scott and his bosses may make decisions, purely based on things that don't have to do with Chuck Fletcher. So maybe Fletcher does get fired at some point. But yeah, I don't know. It's going to be be interesting to see. And Clarke and those guys do wield some power, but not all the power.
Power right now is in ticket sales, and if you look at these games, they're trying not to show the stands anymore or anything. You can see the empty spots right by the glass. They're the power is going to be in sales and revenue, because let's face it, they make their money off of like concessions and stuff down at the games, and if that's not there, it's going to be very painful in the pocket. I can say that much.
No, I mean, this might get to the level of Ben Roberts, who's I think CEO or COO of Comcast. Feel free to correct me on that. I just wanted to chime in on Bob Clarke. I think Bundy had it right. I mean, I don't think Bob Clarke is not a guy with an agenda. He said some things that technically weren't correct in terms of Heiskanen instead of McCarr. The Flyers did like Miro Heiskanen. I wish we had him. But the other thing he said is how he drafted a couple kids at center ice that aren't going to make it, more or less taking a swipe at the chances of Morgan Frost in a way, because I think we all agree that German Rusov was probably a bad pick and just not really an NHL player. He has ability, but it just can't put together. So there was part of that too. But I think at the end of the day, Bob Clarke's frustrated like all of us. But getting back to the overall look at what Comcast is going to do, yeah, I mean, they may step in and say, you've had your 3 years. You've had 2 chances to really build this thing. You had 1 year that you really didn't do much because you didn't want to overreact after a pretty good year, but it hasn't worked out. So, I mean, I could see that as well. It's just how much of a care factor is there, whether it's motivated by pride in the organization and promises that were made to add, or just your own personal affection that the Flyers are something special still in this city, or if it's just pure business, like Dave Scott, Harry Camillo, we're not filling as many units as we need to, whatever
units. Oh God.
Yeah. We don't have widgets in the stands, so it's something.
The apathy that has become the Flyers. I mean, we watch it just to complain anymore on Twitter. It's so sad. I'll tell you how sad it is. I offered to GoFundMe and buy the Flyers, and I think I got $14. That's how bad it was in a poll on Twitter. I mean, that's how apathetic this whole fan base has become. That they're like, you know what? We're going to give him money, and it's not going to be worth it anyway. So,
well, you got to change your last name to Snyder. But maybe that would help. I don't know. So the Flyers are racked with injuries right now. I mean, you look at they just put Ryan Ellis and Sean Couturier on long-term injury reserve, but that was more for cap reasons. But I mean, they joined Kevin Hayes, Joel Farabee, Derek Brassard, Nate Thompson, Patrick Brown, and Samuel Morin on the injured list. And of course, Tanner Lazinski never really even made it and is out for the year, as is probably one of my favorite prospects in the Flyers system right now is Tyson Forster, who was out, I think, with a shoulder problem. So listen, there is a reason why the Flyers have played poorly. That's part of it. We can't ignore that. It's just compete level and the pride in wearing the sweater has really been gone. And now we have Wade Allison. Dan, can we kind of say that God love the kid, you love the way he competes. If he doesn't change the way he plays, he's never going to make it. He's just glass right now. He has a suspected knee injury, and Zach McEwen also is, despite being nicked up, is supposed to play tonight as we record, before the Dallas game. So what about Wade Allison? Really frustrating, huh?
Yeah, Wade Allison's one of those guys who he's a real Flyers type of player. I mean, He's physical. He's a lot like Scott Hartnell, and I think that he'd really add some energy into this lineup and some goal scoring ability. But the problem is he can't stay healthy. This is going back a number of years, going back to college. He's had serious knee injuries. And I know you mentioned he needs to change the way he plays. The knee injury recently, he didn't even his knee just buckled. He wasn't near any other players, I don't think. I mean, I think he's just injury prone. It's a lot of Flyers fans complain on Twitter, and I think some rightly so, that they rush players back from injuries and they get re-injured. They think they did it with Hayes and Ellis, Farabee, a bunch of guys. I don't think you can blame the training staff for Wade Allison, because he gets injured. Like, he came back from the injury and he played in 3 straight games for the Phantoms and 3 straight nights, and he scored a goal in every single game. So he clearly was okay to be back. And then they gave him some time off. He played in another game and played in the Flyers game, and he got injured. So he's just injury prone, and it's a shame, but it seems like him and Sam Morin, these guys just cannot stay healthy.
No.
Sam Morin back yet?
No, I don't think
Sam Morin back yet?
No,
I just think it's funny. Remember everybody that jumped on Sanfilippo?
Yeah.
But it still ain't back yet, so I thought that'd be funny too.
No, it was a serious injury, as it turned out, and he was right. And apparently when Sam first got hurt and he heard about this, he messaged his buddy Riles, and who kind of was getting on Ant a little bit, but it turned out that there was a more significant injury, and I don't think Sam Morin has an NHL future to begin with. Schiff, the only guy I can think of who's had injuries, who finally found a way, not this many, it was a lot of injuries, and I thought his career was going to be over, was Justin Williams. He had a lot of career-threatening injuries.
Yeah, he did early on.
Yeah, he worked out of it. But I not even to this extent with Wade Allison.
Yeah, I mean, there's a player I would have loved to have stay in the organization and blossom to the player he became. He was a great player. He was one of my favorites growing up. But stuff happens, and you go away for years. But yeah, you're right. I mean, he managed to, I guess, get that injury bug under control or exterminate it or whatever, and he had a great career.
Yeah, in Carolina and the LA Kings, and yeah, he was really something else. But people rail about the Flyers moving him, but if I recall correctly, that was for Danny Markov when they desperately needed defensemen. They were going for a cup. So that wasn't like Patrick Sharp, where they basically just threw him away because Hitchcock didn't want to bother with the younger player. That 2 completely different situations. So, I don't know who to believe in terms of rumors with Giroux versus LeBron or Friedman. We'll find out. I mean, at some point, things are going to happen. And like we talked about earlier, we're going to need a mission statement coming from Chuck Fletcher. I'm not expecting it this early, Wednesday, but hope it's going to come soon, because that's what we're going to need. More than anything else, the organization owes the fans, an explanation of how they're going to get out of this. What's the plan? So in the interim, since we last spoke to you, the Flyers lost to the Bruins. We talked. The highlight of that game was an empty net attempt by Brad Marchand that Cam York just wouldn't let him. Knocked him in the net, knocked the net off its moorings, and that was good. And the Flyers had a decent process. They lost to the Rangers 3-2. Then they ended back-to-back with the Islanders. Not very good in the 4-1 loss on the island. They came home, a game they probably should have won, could have won, found a way to lose against the Islanders 4-3. Then they lose to Columbus 2-1, and the fiasco in Buffalo, where team really just about the same level as the Flyers, toyed with the Flyers with it. Dan? He's the ECHL goaltender, Hauser, and they were missing a few guys themselves.
Yeah, the injuries it's out of control. Like Chef said earlier, I tweeted out as basically an AHL type of team, and that's what you're looking at. I mean, I was just looking at the lines for tonight. I mean, it's like what's
take the over.
Yeah, what's crazy is that Nick Seeler is playing 4th line left wing. I mean, the third line is Willman, Frost, and Mayhew. It's the third line. The 4th line is Seeler, Cates, and McEwen. Seeler's a defenseman. Cates is a total non-factor. It's not good out there,
No, and you know what set that up? The fact that I think Fletcher kind of dropped the ball on this one, because they had Sandin and Bunneman playing 2 games in a row or something like that. Or was it 3? Yeah, the last 2 days. So they're on the taxi squad now, but they didn't want them playing 3 games in a row, 3 days in a row. So I think Linus Sandin is a guy who definitely merited an opportunity to get a look at the NHL level. This is the last year of his contract, if I recall correctly. I'm not saying he's a great player, but he's certainly better than some of the players. I was going to call something else. Some of the players that are out there, and he's a useful third line, potentially similar kind of sort of to Michael Raffl. He does a lot of different things, and he can score a little bit. And but there's really nobody else on the Phantoms that I'm looking forward to coming up. I mean, even Zamula looks like he just needs to get stronger. I mean, wouldn't you agree, Dan? With
there's
Zamula?
no Zamula could end up being a pretty good NHL defenseman. And again, he's undrafted, right? There's a reason he was undrafted. Right. Just like Phil Myers. Like Phil Myers should have been drafted, clearly, but we're seeing a little bit of maybe why he wasn't drafted. I mean, the hockey IQ is so low, he can't even get in the Predators lineup. Mm-hmm. So that's part of the problem is 3-4 years ago, we were so excited about the possible upside. Hey, Travis Konechny could be Brad Marchand and Ivan Provorov could be a Norris trophy candidate, right? And now those guys doesn't look like they're going to get to the upside that we predicted. And there's no guys underneath that have those type of big upsides. Like Cam York looks like he could be a serviceable number one power play defenseman, but he's not going to be a dominant top pair, even strength NHL defenseman, right? All these guys, pair, right? All these guys have limited upsides in terms of superstars, right? Which is what we need. And there's nothing like that in the system.
That's what has to change. They need top tier talent, whether they buy it, whether they trade for it. And this is why I talk about trading Provorov. In fact, I want to throw him out. Look, if he were a standalone top pair defenseman who wasn't so partner dependent, I wouldn't even think about it. He'd be one of the core pieces. But because he's not, and he would look good next to somebody like Drew Doughty, for example. And if they think that Turcotte or Byfield, now I'm not saying this could happen. I'm not saying LA would want to do that. I'm just saying that's the kind of deal I'd be looking for.
Yeah, I think that if you want to do a rebuild, I think that maybe moving pieces like a Provorov or a Konechny to like really reset things in this organization, I think that's something that you're going to absolutely have to look at doing if you think you're going to do a full rebuild.
I think you definitely have to look at moving TK. I think he's one of the first ones that I would move. He has some values. He obviously brings energy to the game, whether it's misplaced at times or not. And he's hopefully starting to score again, thank God. And I just think that, he might even be the first one to get moved because I think he's probably the easiest one to move because he has some kind of value. He's got a reasonable contract. I just think he could be the first one going.
Could be. I think if you give up on players, it's okay if you get young players back. I think the Flyers are done trading for guys that have been in the league for 5 years that are kind of lost and not really going anywhere. One of those change of pace trades. I think they have to well beyond that. I just, it's there's too much at stake, and every asset now that they've gotten so much older as a team, it just can't be squandered. So, look, before we go, let's acknowledge tonight that Keith Yandle is going to tie Doug Jarvis with 964 consecutive games. So that is the Ironman record in the NHL. And they play again tomorrow night, of course. It's tonight versus the Dallas Stars. And they play on the island tomorrow, and that would break the record. And then, of course, we have Phil Kessel, who's about 20 games behind, that record, who's, right on Yandle's trail. Chef, any comments?
No, congrats to him. You can have one more, and then you got to sit. That's it. Before he's just lost too much of a step. If he could play like he did 3-4 years ago, even, I'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, you can, yeah. But now, you want to set the record? Okay, good, because the Flyers will take any kind of PR they can get right now. So, but once he's done, bring me up somebody young, I want to see how they perform under pressure in the NHL level, and let's roll from there.
Yeah, I don't know if I go quite to that level because Zamula is what he is, but Adam Clendening, Dan, wouldn't look bad on their power play. Just like they got to try something else because it's not working with Yandle.
Yeah, Chef's, expressed the sentiment that a lot of Flyers fans are hoping. Hey, let's get him to streak over and get him out of the lineup. I don't know if he's going to get out of the lineup. I mean, this team is so bereft of talent on defense, and Phil Kessel's only 23 games behind him. Like, if the Flyers are the ones that end his streak, and then Kessel passes him, he'll be mad about that. I mean, I don't know. The whole thing's a cluster. I mean, honestly, if we're trying to get a worse draft pick, it probably makes sense to keep him in the lineup because he's been so ineffective, So
Good point.
I think if he's healthy, he's probably going to end up playing out the season unless we trade him somewhere and then he can play for that other team. It's amazing with all the players that went through COVID protocol that Yandle never got COVID, right? Like Ivan Provorov is probably more of an Ironman than Yandle because he gets into it more physically and he's never missed a game. And he missed a game because of COVID, and you could tell he was mad, right? Like,
oh yeah.
I wonder sometimes if Yandle didn't have to take the same tests, or people were posting cartoons on Twitter of him showing up for these, COVID tests, wearing bubbles and stuff like that. It's kind of amazing that he never was in COVID protocol.
Friend of mine, he had 5 people in his household never tested positive all time, and they got it, and some people in his house got it twice, and it's like. It's no rhyme or reason. He's never tested positive, never had it. So it's so funny.
You know what? He might have had an asymptomatic case. Never.
Well, he was getting tested for it because everybody in his family was.
No, but I'm just talking about maybe antibodies.
Oh, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, so that happens. And there are some people with natural immunity to coronavirus for whatever reason, but not getting too deep into that. So. Yeah, that's where the Flyers are at right now. We have to hope in the next month, we're going to look for some movement by the team to bring forth what we're asking for, a mission statement, whatever you want to call it. So with that, the Flyers playing tonight versus Dallas on the island, like I mentioned, and then come back against the LA Kings on Saturday, and we'll probably greet you with another next week. Because I'm going to be out of town the following week. And, of course, that's when everything's going to blow, right?
Yep.
So,
of course.
Let's make a final statement before we get rolling here. Dan, anything to say? And if not, by all means, your social media coordinates.
Yeah, folks can find me at dsilver88 on Twitter. It's just can't get any worse, right? I mean, I guess we'll see what happens tonight, and then we'll see this press conference with Fletcher on Wednesday. I just, I don't even want to watch the games anymore, right? It's just kind of on as in the background because it's painful watching these games. But I just hope they start doing things for the rebuild sooner rather than later is my hope.
Yeah, that's what they need. That's how you get hope. That's how you make it through the season. You see a young player in the lineup that you just acquired for one of your other young players. And it's like, okay, yeah, let me watch that. I mean, that's what it was when we got Upshaw and Coburn in 2007. That's what we need, Chef.
Yeah, he's most definitely right in that case. My thing is this: Flyers fans, you have every right to be pissed off, and don't lose that because take that fire and use it to exert your, I guess, influence on the team by either not buying season tickets, not going to the games, or whatever, ghosting the games. I'm fine with that. Things have got to change, and it's all right. If it's all right to be mad, it's all right to be upset, it's all right to be disappointed in the team. And if you want to dispute that with me, you can find me at Chef-FB on Twitter. I'd be happy to talk about all your frustrations with this team. I mean, I have them too. I mean, we all do. And that's how we're going to get through this is if they start making moves, you got every right to comment and tell us how you feel about each of those moves. We encourage it. We want to hear from other people's point of view. So hit us up on that at least too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, as Ilya Bryzgalov would say, why you have to be mad? But anyway, well, he collects his money. Oh, but when he pull up,
he's still getting it. 2 more years, right? 2 more years,
shows up
right?
in his, I wonder if they're ever going to throw out like the New York Knicks Charles Oakley.
Oh, okay.
He got thrown out by Doolin or something like that. What the guy's name? The owner of the
That's
Knicks.
funny.
But anyway, so I'm Isaiah. You can check out what I post on some account, Isaiah ISAIAH _520. Isaiah, don't forget the _520. And shout at me. And of course, you can follow us at O&B Puck. We're also on Getter as well. So if you want to check us out, sometimes I post some stuff I don't say on Twitter there on behalf of O&B Puck. So check that out. So until next time, everybody, hopefully the Flyers say some things, do some things that get us excited. We'll talk about it next time. Take care.